Masechet Bava Kama Daf Ayin Chet. Yesterday we mentioned the statement of Rava, who gives a definition of the word se. He says the word se always means a purebred kosher animal, a sheep or a goat. How does he know that? He learns it from the following paradigm pasuk in Devarim: Zot habehema shetochelu shor se chesabim v'se izim. These are the following are kosher animals, an ox, and then it says se, which in Hebrew includes both sheep and goats. We don't have an English word that is equivalent to it. So it's saying se in the subcategory of sheep, and also se subcategory of goats. So now why'd I have to repeat the word se? I could have just said se chesavim ve'izim. The fact that it repeats the word se means that, according to Rava, that the word se refers to a purebred kosher animal and not a hybrid. So this is a binyan av. This is a paradigm for all other places that the word se will exclude kilayim. Now, we wondered about this because regarding the payment of 4 or 5, it says the word se. If a thief steals a se and slaughters it, he has to pay 4 and 5. And the Mishnah says that includes a kilayim. If a thief steals a hybrid, he does have to pay 4 and 5. So this seems to be against Rava's ruling. So we answered, it says an extra word o there, and the o was coming to include hybrid in that case. Very good. So now we're wondering, Rava's ruling, what does it come to teach us? Because it does not apply to the stealing of 4 and 5. It also does not apply to Kodashim, which we also saw because there's a special pasuk in Kodashim that says the word o twice. And we learned that that comes to exclude that you cannot bring a sacrifice from a hybrid animal. So that we have a specific derivation, and therefore Rava's ruling, we don't need that to apply to Kodashim either. So we're going to go through a few different possibilities. What did Rava want to apply this ruling to? Elaha damar Rava, ze bana av. כל מקום שנאמר se אינו אלא להוציא את הכליים, למאי הלכתה? The statement of Rava that the pasuk in Devarim 14 that is considered a paradigm from which we learn that every time in the Torah says the word se, it means to exclude a hybrid, a kilayim. What law does this apply to that we wouldn't otherwise know it? Kodashim behedjaketi behu shor o chesev pirat le kilayim. If it's kodashim, we already know that from the pasuk that we saw there that says shor o chesev o ez. Remember this word tachat. Once it's born, it has to remain for 7 days under its mother, with its mother alive and fed, and you can only sacrifice it from the 8th day on. And we said this awe and this awe come to exclude a hybrid and a mutant animal that cannot be sacrificed. So I already have a specific pasuk regarding that. I don't need Rava for that. So what else can it apply to? Maaser tachat yalif mekodashim. Maybe you'll say it applies to maasar behema. You have to give 1/10 of animals. So what kind of animals? Certainly purebred animals, but not a hybrid animal. You don't have to give 1/10. Is that what Rava is applying to? No, I don't need it for that because I can learn the gezer shava. It says the word tachat here in the pasuk we just mentioned, and it also says regarding Ma'asar Behema, Chol Ma'asar Bakavason, Kol Asher Yabor Tachat HaShabet. When you do the 10th, count the 10th, you have them all pass through a gate, and you mark the 10th one with a staff. So it says the word tachat there. So I can learn a gezerah shava from these two. Now this also says kol asher ya'avor, whatever passes through. Remember this word? We're going to need it for the next step. So therefore I already know from this gezerah shava that hybrids are not included in the law of maaser. I don't need Rava for that. Maybe it applies to firstborn animals. Firstborn animals are holy, right? And you have to deal with them in a special way. So maybe it comes to say only purebred and not hybrid animals. They're not bechor. Well, that law is true, but I don't need Rava's derivation for that because I have a gezerah shava for that also. We take the word ya'avor here and we compare it with in Shemot Yud Gimel. V'avarta kol peter rechem ladonai. Here it means to set apart, but it's the same root. Any firstborn to Hashem. So it says the word ha'ava, ya'avod, and ya'avod, ha'avara, and therefore we have a gezer hashava. I don't need Rava to tell me that hybrids are excluded from this law. Or I have another way to derive it if you don't want this gezer hashava. Nidme amart la dichtiv ach bechor shor ad shehu shor ubchoro shor kilayim ba'aya. We have another pasuk also regarding firstborn that says ach. Ach is a limiting word. The firstborn of an ox. So this comes to this word ach comes to exclude a mutant, an animal that doesn't look quite like an ox, it looks like something else, is excluded from the law of Bechor. It has to be that it's an ox and its firstborn is an ox, and has to look like that same species, and not if it's a mutant that looks like something else. So if even a mutant which looks funny but is biologically the very same species, if even that's included, then for sure a hybrid, which is a mix of two different species, is going to be excluded from the law. So this Bechor I know already. I don't need Rava for that. Ela ki itmar Rava linyan peter hamor ki ditnan en podin lo be'aige velo bechaya velo b'shchuta velo b'trefa velo b'kilayim velo be'koi. The Rava's derivation that the word se always means only a purebred, that comes to teach me regarding a peter chamor, a firstborn donkey. A donkey is not a kosher animal, yet its firstborn is holy. So you can't sacrifice it, obviously, because it's not kosher. Instead, you have to redeem it with a se. Torah says, right? Tifteh be se. So I know that I have to redeem it with a se. Can I redeem it with a kilayim animal? So let's see. The Mishnah in Bechorot teaches that you cannot take a chamor and redeem it with a calf, nor with a wild animal, not with a dead animal, and not with a terefa animal. Even if it's a seh, but you already did shechita to it, you can't redeem with it, or if it's a terefa, even if it's a seh. You also cannot use a hybrid, and also not a koi. A koi might be different things, maybe a water buffalo or something. It's either safek, whether it's a behema or chaya. The point here is that you cannot use a kilayim animal, even if it's half sheep and half goat. Sorry, you can't use that as a redemption for a donkey. How do I know this? Oh, this is what we need Rava for. Rava says, look at Devarim Yudalid. That's the paradigm, and that teaches that seh means a purebred. Seh, you have to use a purebred to redeem a donkey. All right, so that's a good answer according to most rabbis. Well, Rabbi Elazar de matir bekilayim ditnan. Rabbi Elazar matir bekilayim ibn shu seh lemayil cheta. However, Rabbi Elazar disagrees, and he says that you can redeem a donkey with a hybrid, as it says in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar says it's permitted because that is called a seh. So, according to Rabbi Elazar, what is Rava's derivation applied to? Amalach Rabbi Elazar kitma de Rava. Of course, Rabbi Elazar is a Tana. He would not be mentioning Rava. So when we say Amalach, Rabbi Elazar didn't actually say this, right? Rabbi Elazar could say this if we brought him in a time machine down back to the time of Rava. He could say, or to our time, he could tell us that when Rava said his derivation, he applied it to the following case: l'tameh shenolad min hatahor v'iburo min hatameh. It's a non-kosher animal that's born from a kosher mother and a non-kosher father. If you could have such a case, what would you do with this is a hybrid, and so what is that called? Is it kosher to eat? And Rava says, no, that's not called a seh, that's not called a kosher animal. I guess, for people, as long as the mother is Jewish, the kid is Jewish. For animals, you need both parents to be kosher in order for the offspring to be kosher. And so we learn this from Rava's derivation. Now this derivation of Rabbi Elazar would not be in agreement with Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yoshua agree with the same law. They agree that a hybrid animal, if from a non-kosher, if it's half non-kosher, is not kosher. He agrees with the law, and he actually learns it from the very same pasuk too. Because remember, Rava learned it from Devarim Yudalid, but Rava learned it was through a binyan av. To all cases, Rabbi Yoshua learns it from the plural use nouns in that pasuk. It says sechebasim v'se'izim. So the plural means that its father and its mother have to both be kosher, right? All of them has to be born from 2 sheep or 2 goats. A sheep and a goat also produce a hybrid. The hybrid is kosher to eat, but if it's produced from a non-kosher animal, if the father is non-kosher, then the child offspring is not kosher. So Rabbi Yoshua does not need the Rava for that. He learns it in his own way, but we really only needed to answer the question according to Rabbi Elazar because Rabbi Elazar rejected the previous answer. Good. So that's that we have an answer for everyone. That Rava's binyan av applies to one or the other of these cases. But now that you mentioned a hybrid between a kosher and non-kosher animal, is such a thing possible? Can a kosher female become pregnant from a non-kosher male? Is there such a thing? That seems biologically not be possible. You can read this note here about the different genuses and why this would not be possible. But the Gemara answers, in de kaimalan de I abar mikalut kerebi Shimon. Gemara also recognizes that it's not possible, and so they answer that we're talking about a kalut, which means a kosher animal that has a mutation of non-cloven hooves. Right, just happened to be born without that sign of cloven hooves. And so if the father is a kosher animal but doesn't have cloven hooves, so basically we're considering it not kosher because it doesn't have the right sign, and that certainly could make a female kosher animal pregnant. They could be the very same species. A male sheep without cloven hooves because of a mutation with a female sheep, that's normal and kosher. That child will be no good, according to Rabbi Shimon. This is in elsewhere we learned about this law, and that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And so, yes, this is a case that is talking about of a kosher and non-kosher species. Not literally, it's not that you can have a horse that can mate with a cow. But rather it just doesn't have a sign. Rava. And now Rava asks another question. Hare alai ola v'frish shor uba'acher ve'ganav mi patar ganav nashe bechefes rabanan be'olat ta'of l'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah ditnan. Hare alai ola yavi kebes. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah omer yavi tor o ben Yonah. The question is, if a person says, I obligate myself to bring an olah, and he is liable if it gets lost or stolen, he has to bring another animal because he took this obligation upon himself. And remember, Rabbi Shimon said that if he takes upon this obligation upon himself and he's responsible for it and it gets stolen, and the thief then slaughters it, then the thief has to pay 4 and 5 to the owner because the owner has to go buy another animal. So we're talking about that case, and this owner, he said olah, and he separated an ox. He's going to bring a nice big ox for this olah, very beautiful. What a nice way to fulfill this mitzvah. And then a thief came and stole it and slaughtered it. So now the thief, as according to Rabbi Shimon, has to pay because he has to replace the animal. But how much does he have to pay? Is it enough for him to pay just a kibis, a small sheep, right, which is much cheaper. That also is a korban olah, and that would be good for Rabbanan, or even a bird. Because in Olah, you can give a bird, and that would follow the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, as it says in the Mishnah Menachot. If someone says, I accept upon myself in Olah, what animal can he bring? He can bring a sheep, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He can bring even a bird. He can bring... he can bring a sheep according to Rabbanan. Rabbi ben Azariah says he can bring a bird. They're not even arguing with each other, because the Torah says you can bring any of these animals. It's just what people used to bring in each place, what was considered a nice thing to bring. So basically, if someone says Harei alai olah, he has a choice of what he wants to bring: a big, a small animal, a bird. And so this owner happened to designate an ox. Very nice, Chazak Baruch, he designated an ox. But now the thief stole it. So the thief is responsible to make up what? Does he have to make it up with another ox? Or he just has to make sure that the owner fulfills his vow. And he can fulfill his vow with a little sheep. He can fulfill his vow with a bird. So the thief says, I know I stole your ox, and that ox was hekdesh. So the value of the ox, the thief does not have to pay to hekdesh, because we learned you don't pay 4 and 5 to hekdesh. So he only has to replace the something to the owner so that the owner can fulfill his obligation. Does he have to give him also a big ox? Or the thief can say, oh, listen, I'll make you good. I'll give you a little bird, and that's sufficient for your vow. What do we say about that? Here's the two sides. Do we say that the owner took upon himself something that is called an olah, and therefore, whatever is called an olah, the thief can say, oh, you don't have to bring it. I don't have to give you an ox. I'll give you a little sheep, and that's enough, right? That still fulfills your olah. Or maybe the owner can say, I wanted to do the mitzvah in the best way and bring a nice big ox. And now you stole it, and you're going to give me a little bird? It's embarrassing. I want to come, and I want to really make a big impression. So you have to give me an ox. What do we say? That's the question. Batani Ibaya Hatar Peshat. After Rava asked the question, he figured out an answer too, and he decided Ganav Patar Asmo Mekebes L'Rabanan Be'olat Ha'of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. In fact, the thief does not have to pay back a big ox. He can pay a sheep. If you're following Rabbanan, you can pay even a bird. If you're following Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rava Chabred Rav Ika Matni La Behedya Amar Rava Harei alai olah V'ifrish shor. ובא אחר וגנבו, פטר עצמו בכבש רבנן, ובעולת העוף רבי אלעזר ben Azariah. That whole dialogue that we just had, where Rava asked the question first, wondered about it, and then came to a conclusion, we have that whole tradition in another version, without the question part, just the conclusion. Ravacha, the son of Rav Ika, he says it in an explicit way, that Rava simply said a statement, if someone accepted upon himself an olah, and he designated an ox, and someone stole it, then pataras mo bekeves, then what does he have to pay back? He can pay back just a sheep according to the Rabbanan, or he can pay back just a bird according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. You see something interesting from here, that sometimes when we have a statement in the name of a rabbi, right, so it could be that he Rabbi just taught the statement in a lecture, says here's the halacha, or it could be that it was a result of a much longer discussion of question and answer, and we record only the final answer. That brings us to the next Mishnah. Mecharo chus me'achad mi'me'ah shebo, o she'ta lo bo shutafut. השוחט וניתנה בלה בידו, והנוחר, המעקר, משלם תשלומי כפל, ואינו משלם תשלומי 4 ו-5. If a thief stole an ox and then sold 99% of it, but kept 1% for himself. The Gemara will explain, it's not literally that he made a corporation and made 100 shares, but rather he kept one part of the animal for himself, maybe the horns or the foreleg or the ribeye, kept part of it for himself. So that's not a full sale. Or he had a partnership. He owned an ox in partnership with someone else, and then he steals half the ox from his friend and sells it. Or if he slaughters an animal and it became a nevela. In other words, he's doing shechita, but he does it improperly, such that it's not a kosher shechita, and the animal becomes a nevela, or he just tore it loose, ripped open the animal, and killed it that way, or he uprooted the windpipe as he's slaughtering it. He didn't cut it in the proper way, but uprooted it, like with the back of the knife, and just took it out. Or indeed, if he killed it in any way, shot it, threw it off a cliff, whatever, killed the animal in any other way, in all these cases, yes, he does have to pay double because he stole it, like anything that you steal, but there's no obligation to pay the 4 and 5 because he, in the first couple of cases, he did not sell the whole thing. You're only liable 4 and 5 if you sell the entire animal, and not if you keep part of it for yourself. And in the other cases, you're only liable 4 and 5 if you do shechita in the proper way, according to all the halachot of how you do shechita. And in these cases, the shechita was improper, or there was no shechita at all. He killed it without shechita. Then he does not pay 4 and 5. Okay, how do we define except for one part out of 100? Right? Even if he sells the whole thing except for one hair, right? Is that going to be? He doesn't have to. He's not liable. Amadav chutz midavar hanitad imo bishchita. Rav says he has to be except for something that is prohibited to eat now while it's alive, but will become permitted to eat once you do shechita. So this would be like the meat of the animal, which is not allowed, and that's an essential part of the animal. But according to Rav, if he says, I'll sell you the whole thing except for the fleece, or except for the fleece is permitted while it's alive, not to eat. I mean, I don't know, you wouldn't eat it, but you can use it. You can take it off and make a sweater out of it. So that's not an essential part of the animal, and therefore, if you're holding that back, that's still considered a sale, and you have to pay 4 and 5. So that's Rav's definition. Levi and a Baraita are more machmir, and they say even if the thief holds back just the fleece. I'm selling you. He steals a sheep and sells the whole thing except for the fleece. That is also considered not a full sale. The fleece is even also an essential part of the animal. Okay, so that's 2 statements by Amoraim, Rav, and Levi, and we do have a baraita that backs up Levi. And now we're going to bring another baraita. There's going to be a few baraitas coming up. And as this one is going to have 3 opinions, we're going to try to match them up with Rav and Levi. Mechara chutz miyadaha, chutz meraglaha, chutz mikarna, chutz megizoteha, eno meshalem tashlomei 4 ו5. Tanakama says, if the thief steals a sheep and he sells it, the whole thing, except for its foreleg, except for a back leg, except for a horn, except for its fleece, he does not pay 4 and 5. So we see that this matches up with the opinion of Levi, who says even if you hold back the fleece, that's not a full sale. So, and certainly if you hold back a limb of the animal, it would not be a full sale. So that matches up just fine. Levi, in other words, can follow Tanakama. Rabbi Omer, davar me'akeh b'shchita, eno mishalem tashlomei 4 ו5. Ve'she'eno me'akeh b'shchita, mishalem tashlomei 4 ו5. This is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, something that would invalidate the animal if you slaughtered it without that item. This is talking about like a major a part of the animal, like its liver, or its intestines. So any major organ, a vital organ that it could not live without. If, let's say, somehow this was missing or got ripped out of the animal. Now, it might stay alive for a few more minutes, maybe without its liver, but it's considered already dead, and doing a shechita at that point is not going to change anything. It's like it already died. There is a difference between whether it be tameh or tahor, and wouldn't be kosher anyway. But there still could be a difference. Shechita still makes a legal difference in terms of tumah and tahara of it being a nevela. Okay, so if it's a vital organ and the thief sells it except for a vital organ, then that's considered not a full sale, and he does not have to pay 4 and 5. But if he's not withholding a vital organ, then the thief does have to pay 4 and 5. Now, this is not the same as Rav, because Rav is saying it's part of something that you can eat. The difference between them would be just meat of the animal, right? Any part of the meat, the ribeye, the leg, is something that, according to Rav, he would say that if you withhold that, then you don't pay 4 and 5. But according to the B, if you withhold just a piece of meat that's not a vital organ, you would have to pay 4 and 5. The B is more lenient than Rav, so those do not match up. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Chutz mikarna, eno mishem tashomar ba'ava chamisha, chutz migizoteh mishem tashomar ba'ava chamisha. Rishma ben Elazar is more similar to Tanakama, but he makes a distinction between horn and fleece. He says if the thief steals a sheep and he sells it except for its horn, then that's considered a significant withholding, and he doesn't pay 4 and 5. But if he says, I sell it to you except for its fleece, then he does have to pay 4 and 5. Fleece is not a significant part of the animal and is not withholding. Now, Rav does not agree with this opinion either. That's all three opinions. So, Bishlama leLevi ketanakama, ela leRav keman. Levi can follow Tanakama, but Rav does not fit any of these three opinions. So what are we going to do? Amri Rav damar ki hay tana de Tanya. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rav can follow the following Tana in this Baraita, who is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Now, we already did have Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar right here in this long Baraita, but the following Baraita has a different version of what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says. Remember, in this one, he makes a distinction between horns and fleece. But in the following one, he says something different. Mechara chutz miyada vechutz meragla eno mishlam tashlomei arba'a v'chamisha chutz mekana vechutz megizoteha mishlam tashlomei arba'a v'chamisha. If someone steals a sheep and sells it, except for its foreleg or except for its hind leg, he does not pay 4 and 5. But if he sells it except for its horn or except for its fleece, then he does pay 4 and 5. That fits exactly what Rav says, because the foreleg and the back leg, that's meat that is not kosher before you slaughter it, but then by doing shechita, it becomes kosher. That was Rav's criteria. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar here says that both a horn and fleece are not considered a significant withholding, and you can sell the whole thing except for those. You still have to pay 4 and 5. So this totally agrees with Rav. Oh, good. So now we know that Rav is following this second version of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in the second Braita. B'mai kami palge. Now, what's at the root of the machloket between all the opinions in the long Braita? Tanakama sabar utvacho kulo ba'inan umcharo kulo ba'inan. Tanakama that said that if you withhold anything, right, even if you just withhold a horn, or even if you just withhold the fleece, that's considered significant withholding, and you don't pay. So that opinion says, look at the pasuk. If you slaughter, meaning only if you slaughter it entirely, or sell it, only if you sell it entirely. So you need to sell the whole thing in order for it to be considered a sale for which you would pay 4 and 5. Okay, so that's clear. V'Rabbi Sabar utvacho midi dehava bitficha lapuke midi delahava bitficha umcharo dumya ditficha. Rabbi explains that the first word utvacha, that includes parts of the animal that are required in order to be able to do a slaughter, meaning it has to have all its vital organs in order for the slaughter to be a proper slaughter. And this excludes any part of the animal that is not required in order to do shechita. If it's missing a leg, you can still do shechita on the animal. That's not a problem. Or missing just a piece of meat in it, that's fine as long as it has its vital organs. And that's why Rabbi is the most lenient. And he says, just like that, these things are required for slaughter, so to mecharo is the same category as slaughter, and therefore, if the thief keeps for himself vital organs, then that's not a full sale. But as long as he sells all the vital organs, even if he keeps part of the meat and the leg and certainly the horn and the fleece for himself, that is still considered a sale. All right, that's Rabbi. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Sabar Karna delam lemigza kaima have shiur ve'eno mishalem tashumar b'chamisha gizotea lemegaz kaime have shiur mishalem tashumar b'chamisha. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, this is the first version in the long Baraita, makes a distinction between the horn and the fleece. The horn, which is not meant to be cut off in the animal's lifetime, afterwards you cut it off, make a shofar out of it, but you don't usually cut off the shofar while it's alive. So therefore, it's an essential attached part of the animal, and so if he withholds that from the sale, then it's not a full sale, and he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5. But fleece, which is meant to be sheared during the lifetime of the animal. In fact, a sheep, if you don't shear it, it will just keep growing and growing and overheat and won't be able to walk. So you have to shear an animal, and therefore its fleece that's meant to be cut off is not an essential part of its body. And if the thief withholds that, it's still considered a full sale, and he'd have to pay 4 and 5. The other version of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, which was an agreement with Rav, what would they say? What's their derivation? Yadav raglav desriche tebicha have shiur vela mishalem tashmer b'chamisha kaneha because la sriche tebicha la have shiur. It's foreleg and hind leg that to make it kosher, you have to do shechita. So those are called essential parts, and if the thief keeps it for himself, then it's not a full sale, and he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5. But the horn and the fleece, which you don't have to slaughter it in order to use the fleece and make a sweater, or the horn, you don't need shechita in order for the horn to be permitted for use. That is not an essential part of the animal, and therefore, if the thief withholds that, it's still considered a full sale. Kashya de Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, de Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Tereh Tanaeh, V'alibad Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. We should ask this question when we first brought that second Baraita. We have 2 versions of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. They contradict each other. What do we do? And the answer is there are 2 tradents, 2 memorizers of Baraitot that each had a different version. In fact, yes, there's 2 different traditions about what he said. Tenor Banan, Hagonev hakita'at ve'et hachigeret ve'et hasoma ve'chen hagonev behemat hashutafin hayab ve'shutafin sheganvu peturim. Braita says, someone steals an animal that already is missing a limb, or it's lame, or it's blind, and he sells it. He still has to pay the 4 and 5. And similarly, if he steals an animal that belonged to several partners, there's a few partners that own this ox, and the thief steals it and then sells it, he has to pay 4 and 5. However, if partners steal something, then they don't have to pay, right? There's a couple of people, they're thieves together, and they steal it together and sell it together, they do not have to pay. Now we ask, there's another Baraita that says, partners in crime who steal something and sell it or slaughter it, they do have to pay the 4 and 5. So, which one is it? Amar Rav Nachman lakashya, kan b'shutav sheganav me'havero, kan b'shutav sheganav me'alma. When the Baraita said piturin, that first Baraita, that's talking about one partner that stole from another partner. In other words, they own it together, and then one partner steals from the other. So with the thing that he's selling or slaughtering is partly owned by him, so he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5. But the second Baraita that says Chayavin is talking about the 2 partners in crime that steal a sheep from someone else entirely. So why should they be exempt? They both stole something that did not belong to either of them, and they together slaughtered it or sold it. So then they together have to pay the 4 and 5. We have a challenge against Rav Nachman's answer here. It says your distinction here is not good. Why? Because we have yet another Baraita. Yachol shutav sheganav mechavero v'shutafin sheganvu yehu chayavin tamod omar utvacho kulo ba'inan veleka. can it be that if one partner steals from another partner, they jointly own an ox, one partner steals the other's and slaughters it, can it be that he would be liable? And can it be that two partners in crime who steal an animal from someone else and then they slaughter it, would they be liable to 4 and 5? And the answer of this baraita is no, because it says utvacho, that he slaughters it. He has to slaughter the entire thing. One person has to slaughter the entire thing. If he only slaughters one portion of it, his portion, then he does not have to pay 4 and 5. And since it's jointly owned, so the one who slaughters it is only slaughtering one portion of it, because he doesn't own the whole thing. And so we don't have that, and therefore he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5. You see, according to this, that two partners in crime that steal something that's not either of theirs, and they slaughter it, is not liable. But according to Rav Nachman, he explained that the second braita that says liable is where two partners in crime steal it, the same case. And he said that is liable, but this says not so. Ela amar Rav Nachman. So rather, we fix Rav Nachman's answer. Yes, he made a distinction, but this was the following distinction that he made. La kashya, kan b'shutav shetabach ledat havero, kan b'shutav shetabach shelo ledat havero. Both baraitot are talking about, all three baraitot, in fact, are talking about a case where two partners in crime steal something that does not belong to either of them, and then they slaughter it. But there's a distinction. If one partner in crime slaughtered it with the knowledge and consent of the other partner in crime, it's like, what should we do? Should we slaughter it, make a barbecue? Said, yeah, okay, go ahead, you do it. And he does it, then they are liable to pay 4 and 5. But if they both go into the barn and steal an ox, and then one slaughters it on his own while the other thief is not there, so then neither of them are liable, because he didn't slaughter all of the animal that he owns, and the other partner didn't know about it and didn't consent to it. So when the Braita says patur, is talking about without ownership, without knowledge. So that would be the third and first Braita, but with knowledge is the second Braita that said that he's hayav. We complete the daf with a couple of dilemmas. Ba'e Rabbi Yirmiyah. Mechara hos misheloshim yom. Hos memelachta, hos me'ubara, mahu. If the thief stole an animal and then sells it to the buyer with the stipulation that I'm going to sell it to you except for 30 days. In other words, I'm going to keep it for myself, the thief says, and then you can have it after 30 days. So is that considered a full sale? Because after 30 days it'll be a full sale. Or do we say he's withholding because he's keeping it for those 30 days? Or if he sells it and says, here, I'm selling you the animal except for its work. Any work that it does, any benefit that accrues from its work, I get to keep. But otherwise, you can have the animal. Is that considered a full enough sale, or is he withholding too much? Or if he says, I'm selling you a pregnant animal, except for its fetus, I'm keeping the fetus for myself. Is that considered a withholding of a significant part, and therefore that's not called umechara, and the thief does not have to pay 4 and 5? Or is he selling the whole animal and the pregnant and the fetus is a separate entity, and therefore is not considered withholding, and he does have to pay 4 and 5. We're going to focus on the last one. There's two opinions about the status of a fetus. One is that a fetus is a limb of the mother. It's a part of the mother. It's an organ of the mother, and therefore it's an integral part of the mother. The other opinion says it's its own entity. This has a lot of ramifications, especially for the laws of abortion. But here we're talking about, is this considered a significant withholding? If it is a limb of the mother, then obviously he's withholding. Like we said before, if you withhold a major part of the animal, then that's not considered a full sale. And here, this is a limb, it's a major part of the animal, and so that would be withholding, and the thief would not be liable to 4 and 5. That's for sure. The question that Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking is more difficult for the other opinion. If the fetus is not considered a limb of the mother, but rather its own independent entity, what do we do? Me'amad amrinan kevan de mechubar ba'haveh shiur, or dilma kevan del mifrash mina ka'eh la'haveh shiur. Do we say on the one hand that right now it's attached to the mother and therefore it's a significant withholding and he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5? Or do we say, yes, although right now it's part of the mother, but eventually in a few months it's going to give birth and then it's not going to be attached. So just temporarily attached to the mother, but since it's meant to be detached, therefore it's its own entity and is not a significant withholding, and in that case he would have to pay 4 and 5. That's the two sides of the dilemma. Or another version of the two sides. On the one hand, you could say, since it's not a limb of a limb of the mother, but it's an independent entity, therefore it's not a significant withholding. I'm giving you the whole animal. What, this fetus? It's a separate thing altogether. That's not called withholding, and therefore he does have to pay 4 and 5 because he sold the whole thing. Or dilma kevan de sarich leishtaruye behada bishchita kevan de shebekufa dameh teko. Or should we say that in order to eat the meat of the fetus, one would have to do shechita on the mother, and therefore it's considered an essential part of the mother, even though for other laws it's considered a separate entity. The halacha is that if you do shechita on a pregnant cow and then you find the fetus inside, the fetus doesn't need its own shechita. And if you don't do shechita on the mother, then anything inside the mother's body would be prohibited. So since in order for the fetus's meat to be kosher, you'd have to do shechita on the mother. So we saw that was one of the criteria in the various definitions above, that anything that requires shechita, that was Rav's definition, anything requires shechita is called an essential part, and therefore this fetus would be an essential part of it, so we leave this unresolved teko. The last question, Ba'erav Papa, Genava, Keta'a, Umechara, Mahu, Miamrinan Maideganav, Ha, La Zabin, or Dilma Madezabin, Ha, La Shier, Teko. If someone steals an animal, cuts off one of its legs, and then sells it, what do we do in that case? Do we say that which he stole, he did not sell, and therefore he didn't sell the whole thing, and so he doesn't have to pay 4 and 5? He stole an animal with 4 legs, and then he sold an animal with 3 legs. It's not the same. Or do we say that which he sold, he did not leave anything out? It's true, he cut off a leg in between, but now it's a 3-legged animal, and he sold the entire 3-legged animal. It's not like the cases above where he sold a full animal, but then said, I'm withholding from the sale part of this animal that I'm giving you. Here, since he cut off the leg beforehand, not a very nice thing to do, but he is also a thief. Since he already cut it off and he's selling everything which is now part of the animal, so do we say that is a full sale? And we leave this question standing as well. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.